the main thing on the agenda today is to make sure we're feeling good about the state of the course completion token, which serves as the initial contributor token that's going to be used to unlock commitments in this first instance of the project treasury and escrow. So I wanted to kind of go through the state of that and to align on questions around that. Maybe as people show up, let me just skip over here. Suri, your question is about some token address. Was that a custom function in the front end?
Hey, James. Yeah.
Hey.
It was something we did on live coding with Nelson, I believe. Yeah, with Nelson. So
was that in one of his custom components? Just I'm trying to remember exactly what we were covering in that module.
Just hang on.
Yeah. Hey, Justin, Adrian, Nelson. Hey, Entropy.
You have the video link for that. If you just pull that video out.
Yeah, let's see. This was a live coding session. Oh, we were looking at GraphQL. Yeah, I remembered when we did this. And the goal was, okay, so if I query any address that has an arbitrary number of UTXOs in it, how do I get just the total value at that address?
Right.
Yeah.
The sum of available tokens on any particular address.
Right. And so Browser Wallet makes that really easy for us. But do we have a similar function for just looking at any address? I'm going to follow up with you later today on that, because that could, I have to go down. Yeah. Is anybody familiar with a built-in function that makes that easy? I know there's like a Koios call that we could make on the right network. How else have people been approaching that problem?
Is Koios running now on pre-production?
That's the thing, right? It's not. So I think we have a Dandelion instance of Koios running on pre-prod right now, but that's what I need to check. That's why this would kind of take me down a rabbit hole of just getting those right things. So let me do that on my time and then get back to you.
With that's great.
Current state of that.
Okay.
Roberto, hey. All right. So I'll look up that question, just wrote that down. Anything else on people's minds? Yesterday, we looked a little bit about next steps for PPBL and the GPTE. I'll post that video along with this one this afternoon. Anybody have any immediate questions before we jump into contribution tokens? Right, let's take a look at this. So there is a live repo for this on GitLab. So I'm sharing that in the chat right here. And when you look at the repo, you'll see what's on my screen here. Oops. In this PPBL contributor directory. And so there's a Plutus bit, there's a front end bit, and there's some token minting stuff. The Plutus bit is minimal. The idea here is that there's going to be an address somewhere. So I want you to think back to everything we've done with reference UTXOs so far. And we learned together that reference UTXOs can live at any kind of address. And there's some nice implications to this. If I place a reference UTXO in a wallet that I hold the keys to, then I have the ability anytime to spend those reference UTXOs and therefore invalidate them. And there's cases where maybe that's a good move. But if I have an application depending on a reference UTXO with a Plutus script, maybe I don't want to rely on someone else maybe being able to break my application by removing that reference script. And this is where storing reference UTXOs at either a multi-sig address or a Plutus contract address could have an advantage. And we've talked previously about even making an address that's unspendable, right? If I want to make a DApp and provide some assurance that that contract is always going to be available, one choice I could make is to send that reference UTXO to an unspendable address. I'm not yet confident enough in any of the contracts I've written to think they're going to last forever, so I haven't done that yet. Everything I'm saying that applies to reference scripts also applies to inline datum. And so that's what this contract right here is all about, okay? Given that somebody has a credential that allows them to spend from a contract address, this is a simple validator that just allows you to spend what's at an address, return a UTXO to that address that has some inline datum, and therefore basically by holding this token, be able to change the datum that we're referencing. So let me pause there. I wanted to frame what we're thinking about by starting from this place of reference UTXOs with inline datum. What clarifying questions do you have so far? And we can come back to this too. Okay, so simple logic here. That's basically just gating access to who can change inline datum. So inline datum for what? This is where we can take a look at the tokens for a minute. There I've got some keys that I was testing. Let's look at this script right here. Mint token pair. Okay. So this is what we're talking about here is a primitive implementation of what's described in CIP 68. So for anybody who needs that reference, let me just drop a link to that into the chat. Now, CIP 68 gives us a way to think about token pairs. The precise naming conventions for those token pairs are still being debated in CIP 67, okay? So 68 kind of shows us, look, here's this concept of how you can use updatable datum essentially as the metadata for a given token. SIP 67, like I said, still ongoing, nothing officially approved there yet. Talks about how to name these two tokens. So I didn't sweat too much in this initial implementation, thinking about how we name these things. And so these, I added these as project variables in a separate script. You see how the reference token and contributor token are each going to have a certain prefix, and those are unique from each other. Then a shared base name that'll be common to every contributor token. And then some alias, and this is one of the things I want to bring to everybody today, that refers to a particular contributor. Okay, this is so-and-so's contributor token. If we look in the project variables at what those prefixes are, this is what's suggested in SIP 68. And really the questions are around, hey, should there be brackets around this prefix in some way? And that gets deeper into what's going to be necessary for standardization and also automatic minting. But like I said, I'm not concerned about getting that part perfect yet, just kind of testing the concept here. Any questions at this point? So what we're going to end up with is a pair of tokens that have the same name except for the prefix. We're going to have a 100 prefix on the reference token and a 222 prefix on the contributor token. The contributor token gets sent to a user and can live in any wallet. We don't have to worry about associating it with a particular pub key hash. That gets us into the realm of identity. And that work is still ahead of us. How do we know that the person we want holding this token is indeed the person who holds it? For now, these early days, and what I'm really curious to see emerge here is, personally, once I have a contributor token and I start building up a reputation on that token that has timestamps as to when that reputation was developed, I'm not selling that thing to anybody. Now, is there a future where somebody does sell their contributor token? Probably, right? We're probably going to see that happen. And what we want to do is safely set ourselves up to explore what happens if we ever get to that point. But I'm also wondering, 2 years from now, we might find that none of these were ever sold because all of us recognize that this reputation we built up, we wouldn't want to trade that. The reference token lives at the contract address, and this is the one where the reference validator I was just showing you would apply. Roberto, what do you think? Oh, Roberto, I saw your hand go up and down. You still got something? Oh, darn it. Okay, he says his mic's not working. Okay, just jump in and interrupt if you got that online. So what actual data are we placing in the UTXOs at this reference address? We can look at this datum right here. I gotta remember this. This is the hex, I think, of the alias right here. I have to double check on this bit right here. I think that's gonna match. Oh, let me just yeah, this right here, this is just gimbal with a capital G. And so this is an example of how we can put an alias in the reference data, but this might be redundant right here. The rest of this is coming directly from our conversations earlier about what information we want on the course completion token. And so this is, right, a Plutus map of keys to values, where we've got this is the byte string for just the number string 301, right? 301, 302, 303. Those are the canvas modules. We could have just used ints right here, but I chose to make it a byte string just in case there's ever a reason to have like a named module or something, to give ourselves some flexibility there. And then you've got the current mastery level. And this was something that we were thinking about early on in some of those conversations about the contributor token, that, okay, somebody might want a completion token, but later on go finish some additional modules inside the course. And I'm excited that this, to me, seems like it solves that problem. If you get your completion token when you have the minimum complete, right, mastery level 2 on each of these modules, or at least a 4 on any one of them. So here's a possible, this would be a valid minimum completion, for example, right here. But maybe later on you go back and finish more modules in the course. Now it's trivial to update that data later on to represent that you've achieved mastery level 4 on everything. It's also trivial to add additional fields to this data later on. So suppose we build a module, a mastery level 304 module about, you name it, right? There's a dozen different things that I think we can start building for. But as additional modules come online, it'll be straightforward simply to add that to this metadatum so that it's represented in people's reputation. And any fields can be added. So right here, a simple int, just as a placeholder for how many commitments a contributor has successfully completed. Each time someone finishes a project on the GPTE, they receive the rewards for that. We could make it so as part of that transaction, the number here just increments. But we also might discover that you want some record of specific projects that were completed. This can be changed over time, right? We can change the shape of the data itself as we learn what we want it to say. And eventually, could that be a standard? Sure, maybe. But I think, personally, my goal right now is to learn as much as possible about what we want this data to be, so that we can maybe see a standard emerge. But we'll know, we'll know if we have a strong opinion on that, because we'll be able to see it in action as we build it together. All right, so I know you must have thoughts and questions at this point. What's everybody thinking?
Looks like my college transcript.
This is that's our highest level goal, right? Is to provide an alternative to that.
Yeah.
I was trying to wrap around like how what do you say, high level structure of this. So you say there's like two tokens that are token pairs. What do you mean by token pairs? I just don't understand. If you could please tell me.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, this is the key part we have to wrap our heads around. So, and let's step back for just a second and think about what NFTs have been so far with the CIP25 standard, right? You mint a token, you include some metadata on the minting transaction, and that's the standard that front-end tools are referencing to show any number of arbitrary attributes that have to do with that token. And because a lot of people have built wallets and other front-end tools, that's emerged as a standard for viewing images on NFTs, but also a bunch of NFT projects are playing with other parameters and all that. Now, that minting metadata, it can be updated, but long story short, it's not convenient to do it, and there's some other things that you have to consider when updating that metadata. Additionally, that metadata is not directly, you can't directly use it in a smart contract. You could build a front end that looks at some metadata and consumes those values and uses them as inputs in some data or redeemer. But that's a security hole because it will be easy to kind of get in between that process. In this case, the datum we want to reference is already on chain and can only be changed according to whatever rights we have as we think about where to store that datum.
Yeah,
And so yep.
So what am I getting is like before this CIP, it was impossible to read datum contents without making a transaction, and now we can just like inquire and it will return datum, and the transaction will not happen, right?
I'm distinguishing between transaction metadata, which is not directly referenceable by a smart contract, and datum, which right now we have inline datum. And this didn't happen within the first few days after the hard fork. It took a couple weeks, but now we have in GraphQL the ability to query inline datum and actually see these values. Right, so they're both consumable from a front-end perspective and from a Plutus perspective, which is an advantage in itself. And they're updatable because of this concept of token pairs. Okay, so finally going back to your original question, the contributor, or more generally any user, can hold a token in their wallet that somehow is paired with another token that lives at some reference address with this datum in the UTXO. So you're going to have a UTXO that has the reference token and this datum here. And the user's token is going to be able to because of the names of those tokens, we're going to be able to say, okay, this user token is associated with this reference token. And we can make it look like, as I'll show you, with a front end, we can make it look like just as coherent an experience as when somebody looks at a 721 NFT.
Isn't it the policy ID that pairs them? Because in the CAP, under constraints and conditions, the first is the user token and reference NFT must be under the same policy ID.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. I skipped over that. Right. So first and foremost, they have to have the same policy ID. But then even among the tokens with that policy ID, there might be Alex's contributor token, Adrian's contributor token. And so we can then, underneath the policy ID, use a naming convention to distinguish between different contributors on the same policy ID. So we can mint a pair. You know, this is not automated yet. It's still just a proof of concept right now where we would need to just initially write the datum here. Obviously, this needs to be automated. We mint that pair, sending one token, the one with the 222 prefix, to the contributor's address. So the contributor asset goes to the contributor. The reference asset with the 100 prefix goes to this reference address. This is the one specified by the validator that I started with. There's still going to be minting metadata. Okay, let's look at this for just a minute. There's still going to be metadata because maybe we still want an image that shows up in people's wallets. And there can still be, I mean, this part right here is another thing I want to ask for help with today. We can still put any minting metadata we want to on the token. And so tell me if it's best to dive deep into this right now, or you know what I want to do? Just to give you a little picture of what this looks like, I want to show you the front end just so you have that basic picture in mind. And then let's come back around to this bit right here. But we're still using transaction metadata within a certain scope. All right, it's in front end. Okay, so, oops, I'm not sharing that yet. Over here. Nothing, not much work done on presenting this yet. And the critical thing, I have to remind myself this, that the entire Cardano NFT ecosystem is made possible by some relatively arbitrary agreements, right? A bunch of people agreed. This metadata key, 721, is what we will watch for. And we're going to look for metadata formatted like so. And we're going to build tools that consume that metadata and to most end users presents a kind of an end user experience that meets their expectations, right? That you don't have to think too hard about, boom, here's an NFT. And that's exactly the position we're in here, is on the front end, users might not have to think too hard about what they're seeing under the hood. Okay, so if I connect my wallet, I can see that this wallet holds the 222 contrib test gimbal. And I can, right, it's easy to filter. Okay, this is mine. So I can see the list of all of them, or I can see the one that I hold in my wallet. And it's just, right, it's just taking this part of the string, cutting off that 222 there to say this one's yours. Here's directly from a simple GraphQL query to get those mastery levels and the total number of contributions and the alias on this token. Obviously, a lot can be done here to make this a really dope user experience. Alex, what do you think?
So just that I understand, right? So what the problem that it solves is like, okay, I come to a guy and I say, hey, man, I want to work and I would like have these skills. I learned with Gimbal Apps, yeah, and I complete this and this. And I provide them with my token in the wallet, and they can get the reference to all the like instances where my like when initially like this country like the per token was created and how the like modules were added to it on the like in time with the like next transactions, right?
Bingo.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can imagine, because remember, all this right here is already on chain as inline datum. And that means it's now possible to write a minting policy that says, hey, I'm building a project and I would like to have a certain expectation about the experience of contributors to this project. And anybody can set those parameters to whatever they want. I could write a minting policy that says you can only mint this expert contributor token for a specific project if all of these mastery levels are 4, or if you have a record of at least 5 successful contributions or some arbitrary number right here. Those rules could be anything. And maybe we'll start to realize that there's something else we want to track. Maybe just the number of contributions doesn't feel sufficient because there's different levels of contribution. So maybe we'll realize that we want some other field here to kind of track the nature of contributions and allow for that. But at the end of the day, whatever we decide on, anybody else who comes along is going to be able to set their own rules for what are the prerequisites to contributing to this or that project.
Yeah, you could have a score like on Stack Overflow where you cannot post until you have such reputation, and you cannot like do that, and like so gating with the reputation, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Now you get that next contributor token and you start to generate some reputation there. Where does the record of that go? And so now you start to see, well, maybe I'll have multiple reputations that are administered by different groups. Or maybe this is where groups can start to collaborate more closely and say, hey, we want to recognize contributions that are happening over there in your organization. And we'd like to share what's happening here in ours. Let's make some agreement where all of those contributions end up in the same reference data. Or datum, sorry, right? So if I go back to, right, this datum right here, maybe this becomes a shared resource among groups where all of those contributions across groups are being collected in some way. Yuli says, is this a parameterized contract per contributor? Good. Okay. So the only contract so far is this validator that allows some token holder to spend reference UTXOs from a given address. And so for now, in this first implementation, every every one of these reference UTXOs will be visible at the same contract address. And actually, let's go look at that address now. There are reference parameters though. And let's take a look at what those reference parameters is. Just the policy ID of the admin token and of the contributor token for now. So there could be other reference addresses as we build out who is responsible for administering these things. And I hope it goes without saying, right? This initial proof of concept has just one admin policy ID, right? So we could make a bunch, we could mint as many of these as we need to, having people able to update that reference datum. But that could be a point of failure, right? Or a point of consolidating power. So we want to make sure that it's robust, the way the ability to update that reference datum is distributed. And we'll probably want to automate that, right? So this is a really nice use case for thinking about using App Wallet, for example, from Mesh, and automating this update happening, for example, when people complete a project commitment, for example. But hopefully you recognize this is a place to start. Okay. So I wanted to jump back to, with that picture in mind of what this, once the information's available on the front end, we can make it look pretty, and that part's just going to be fun. But let's take a close look at the metadata here. This is just our 721 policy ID and token name metadata, so that there can be an image or otherwise visual attached to the token. And I have the animation that Juan and Curtis created. I just put it on IPFS this morning. And so I want to test that. We might have time to do that today, just to make sure we can get that working. But nothing too surprising right here. Does anybody have any questions about what you see? And then here, so I have a few questions about this. One is I want to know if we're getting the information right. So I want to talk through what's here. And then two, I want to ask everybody whether we should just be placing all of this arbitrary metadata in 721 so that it's visible, for example, on Pool PM already. Okay, so that's the second question. But before we get to where this information goes, just to show you what's here, I placed these in transaction metadata because unlike mastery levels, which are going to change, this information should be a constant. How did I get this contributor token? Through this course, this version. When we developed this metadata together a few months ago, we talked about having course providers here. That can be an array of strings, for example. And then I wanted to place in the metadata for some extra redundancy. Hey, here's the policy ID that you're looking for. And when you look for the reference token associated with this mint, this is the token name you're looking for, right? So in addition to knowing the reference contract address, you can also query the chain anytime to find the location of this reference token. And that's how you're going to find the reference metadata. There's also a URL to the mastery policy on gimballabs.com. This is a sufficient starting place. I need to update this bit right here, but it's just an overview of the course that can be updated with the rules for receiving a token and an outline of the course. So that, for example, people assessing whether or not this reputation means anything to them, Alex, see you soon. People can at least reference this. And so this will be a dynamic document. We have a fixed URL in the minting metadata, but we can always be updating this as we go to make sure it's telling people what they want to know. How do you all feel about the contents of the transaction metadata right here? Thanks, Nelson. And once again, if we ever decide any of this needs to be dynamic data, any of these fields could be moved to the metadata. But I'm just trying to think practically about what data points are going to change on a regular basis versus those like right here that can be constant. The thing I really don't know what to do, and so I would love your advice, is should this data be under some other arbitrary key, or should we just try to move all this into the 721 metadata? Anybody have a strong feeling about that?
What exactly would be the difference in terms of how you would use it, or
Yeah, me of putting this inside of the 721 field is that then this information can just be visible if somebody views their contributor token on an existing tool like Pool PM. You know, when you go to see some art NFT, sure, you can see the image, but there's always like some arbitrary data that people choose to add there that tells you whether it's properties or a website or all that. So the advantage of putting this here would be that we get that kind of exposure to the data.
We could still see this data in like a Cardano scanner or something like that, right?
That's exactly right. We can still see it on just tools that look at all metadata. And of course, any front ends Gimbal Labs PPBL builds will look for this key, whatever it is, and present this data somehow, right? So no matter what tools are out there in the world, no matter what the key is, we can build our own tools that present this.
Wouldn't it be a cheap way to marketing our course if we put it in the label 721?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's good for exposure, for sure.
I don't feel
So-
like it might be beneficial to differentiate, on this level, and just call it something else.
Call this data something else.
Yeah, instead of the 721 label.
And so in the 721, by the way, this is the structure of any NFT mint is you get a policy ID here, and then you can have any number of tokens under that policy ID. So we have policy ID dot token name for the contributor token, and policy ID dot token name for the reference token. This visual, I don't feel strongly that there needs to be a visual on the reference token, but just showing that it's possible to do this each time we mint one of these. But yeah, I think, and right here you can see I threw the details link on at the very least, so people can look at that. Do we want to, and so it's okay also to be redundant. It costs a little bit more to add more metadata, right? But for example, it would be easy just to make a copy of these two lines right here. So like Adrian is saying, we could have just the exposure by doing something like this. But then we could also have redundant information or some other key that allows us to serve some other purposes. But again, this is where I haven't had a strong feeling. I was hoping somebody would feel really strongly about where all this goes.
So we could basically have this both ways. It's just a matter of how much it would cost to add that extra information to the 721 format.
That's right. Got Steve and Alex saying it sounds like it's probably worthwhile to have something of our own here. And maybe just the right amount of marketing collateral up here.
For me, this is a whole different class that really gets into identity, right? And this is why I asked the question. Like I get the convenience and of using the 721 format and all of that, and the fact that that's what that's what the most people look at right now, right? There's not a type that nobody knows about, like if we were to make up our own type. And yet, we're starting to realize, over the last year or two, how much and how wide the spectrum is of what people need in their identities, right? It's as big as there are the number of individuals, really. And I'm thinking it's, because this is really the birth of, like, God knows how many people who are going to be working the way this group is working and developing reputation in the same way. I'm just kind of wondering if maybe this may be a way to step out and just differentiate, because because it is different. It's just way different than Kong NFTs.
So keeping something here gives us a way to start making that distinction. Yeah. Jingles, we can count on Mesh to officially recognize whatever number we happen to type right here, right? And just, this will be native. There we go. Yeah, I'm feeling excited about leaving something here. And so take a little time to think about whether all of this is necessary or if you feel like anything's missing. I think it's really good to have this reference NFT stated at minting time. And then we'll be able to pull that in. I think it may be worth it to wrap all of this in the same way that the 721 token is wrapped, because it'll make it easier for us to build some tools around that. So what if I try this? If I pull that, copy this here, and then take this, and put it inside. I just need one more. Right, so this would allow us to say, okay, on the standard that we're just experimenting with here, we can say the name of the contributor token, and then we can say, here's the information about it. Anybody got an instinct for whether we need an image on the reference token itself? Or is it okay if we just don't worry about images on those and we know they're sitting there on a reference address? If we kept something like this, you would be able to like go on pool PM to the contract address, right? This reference validator address, and you would just see a page full of the same logo representing how many reference tokens are out there right now. I could imagine that being kind of cool, but I don't know how much it really matters.
Yeah, because if it's going to be the same logo, it's not really going to help you identify like individually any different token, right?
Yeah, well, it'll say 100, and then it'll say, I forget what the name was, contrib. So this is like contrib test right here, I think, and then the alias that's on the token. So you know, you'd be able to see each alias right here. But yeah, they'd just be the same token image with all those names that just have a different ending on each of them.
Yeah.
Any objections to just getting rid of this? I'm leaning towards just deleting it, but yeah, let's start without it. Let's keep that. Let's simplify that a little bit. Okay, so the image, any image or publicly viewable with existing tools is going to be associated with the contributor token held in somebody's wallet. But we're not going to worry about making those reference tokens visible as visual NFTs. They're going to be serving their role in the background. These three lines right here, repeated from also this custom data that we're providing ourselves. To me, it feels worth a little bit, you know, the however many ADA pennies this is going to cost. It feels worth it to throw this in here. I agree with Adrian. Any objections to leaving this part here?
I was just thinking, since one is like for marketing and the other one is, yeah, could we make it just gimbalabs.com instead of mastery policy, since we have two, we could use maybe one for, I don't know, linking directly to the organization and the other one to the policy.
Mm-hmm. So this link right here is going to show up on those tools like we've been talking about, Pool PM, etc. And this one might be a little bit hidden. I'm kind of leaning towards, I want to expose people to this, I think. I like the idea of somebody clicking the link and not being, there's another topic that has come up this week. It's time to update this a little bit and make our calls to action a little clearer. But in this case, I kind of like the idea of somebody not needing to navigate our site and coming straight to this, like straight into the details. Hey, what's going on with that token there?
I was just thinking that maybe if you're going to go into a course, you might want to know something about the organization that's giving the course.
All right, let's make it just, here's our provider. And then that'll light a fire to make sure that that landing page is what we need it to be. We could have a call to action about these tokens on there. Yeah, that way somebody can learn in general. Okay. I'm going to see if I can get that animation working right here. And I'll let you know. And then description. I initially described it like this. But I think this might be a little specific. Okay, Sarah says, can a token holder's ID be verified using a smart contract referencing the DID? Okay, so we're going to be able to write smart contracts that reference this policy ID. And as a matter of fact, in the project treasury and escrow, this is going to be one of the instance parameters for the first release of GPTE on mainnet, and it will be a different policy ID, right? Because I need to create this this with some mainnet keys instead of some pre-prod keys. So yeah, we'll have this policy ID that'll allow people to unlock from the treasury, to place a commitment in escrow, and then to start completing those commitments. We don't yet have an actual DID. This is a step in that direction, okay? There's a bunch of groups working on DIDs right now, and tying this to one of them is a priority of mine in 2023, but we're not ready for that right away. But what we are ready for now is the ability to use this policy ID. This is just a token that's going to serve as an access token to dApps, just like the PPBL access token or anybody who has that pre-prod GPTE token. It's going to serve the same thing. It's also possible to write contracts where you have to have a certain name. Okay, so I could write a contract and either in the parameters or in the datum supply a list of one or more token names that are invited to participate in that contract. That's absolutely possible. So yeah, given policy ID and token name, we can create contracts around all of that, but the DIDs are still a work in progress. Jingles, to your question, these would be non-fungible because there's not going to be any repeated names right here. They do come in pairs because this string right here, right, matches this string right here, and you've got the 222 prefix, which is held in a contributor's wallet, and you've got the 100 prefix that's held at the reference address. But there won't be any repetition on the rest of that string afterwards, and that'll help us distinguish between individual contributors. Okay. And what I'm going to do is post this recording and a link to the repo with this code in it. And I'm going to ask for people's review after you have some time to think about it. So don't worry. I'm really excited to get GPTE on mainnet, but it's also really important that we feel good about this. So as we put finishing touches on that, and prepare it for deployment, we've got a little bit of time just to be thinking through this. I'm going to follow up and show the working animation by replacing this IPFS URL and making sure it's the right type. But last, let's talk about the name of this token. So you can see the hex representation of it here. But let me go, let's look at this a different way. I want to look at this policy ID on Cardano scan. Okay. So I've used the minting script twice at this point, and 2 pairs of tokens have been minted. So to take us full circle, right? We've got someone named Alice and someone named Gimbal participating here. Contrib test is going to be replaced with some string that's common to all of these tokens. And then individuals need to be identified with some kind of alias right here. So this string first, is it okay, instead of contrib test right here as our token, I'm trying to highlight it, but it's not working. Instead of contrib test right here, is it okay if we say PPBL contributor or PPBL completion? Something like this. So I just typed this. So you would have something in your wallet. Whoops, not complete. I don't like that. 100 PPBL completion, and then your alias here. So I just typed that in the chat. Any objections to PPBL completion right there? Cool. Now, as for the alias, my instinct is to leave it up to individuals, just with the disclaimer that this goes on chain. This is some kind of identifier that goes on chain. So, you know, I recognize I'm sufficiently doxed at this point, but maybe I still don't want to put my first and last name on a token, you know. What kind of guidance should we provide for contributors, or suggestions can we make when we talk about what goes right here? Oh yeah, what's going on? Right here, alias. Should we set any specific rules? Just allow people to do whatever
Maybe
they want.
someone can give the name when he claims the token that he wants, the name that he wants.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we can leave it up to people to say what they want right here, and that's that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, honestly, because people are so they really don't really know how this works. Like, I don't think they really understand the concept of the mainnet and things registered. New users, I'm not saying recent users, but people that might be using this in the future. And because it's staying there forever, I don't know, people could mess up. I'm not sure if this is a good time to leave it up to the user, but that's just my opinion.
Mhm. There's nothing proving an association between these tokens and an individual yet. You can look at what wallet that token was initially sent to, try to do some forensics from there. If you have malintent, but also with the best intentions, maybe someone wants proof that indeed this contributor token belongs to this person. That does take us into the realm of decentralized identifiers and how we're, that ongoing work of tying people to on-chain identity. But if we're too ambiguous right here, maybe we do the contributor a disservice, right? Because it's hard to associate them with the token that represents their accomplishments or reputation. But if we put too much of an identifying alias right here, or like Roberto's saying, if we don't provide any guidance and let people do whatever they want, maybe that opens up some pitfalls in the long term. And it's wild to think about this, right? Because we're trying to make some decisions that will go out there into the world and will scale a bit. And it's hard to even, it's kind of hard to assess the reality of this right now without having seen it out into the wild. So we want to be safe, but we want to say enough that there's some benefit here.
I think the way you're putting it is a fair compromise, just providing some sort of guidance and format that would protect the user to some point, right? And then the rest is up to them.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards that.
So otherwise we can create random numbers and deliver them to one and
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there could just be some kind of hash or number on there. Absolutely. Jingle says,
Or maybe a hash of the alias that they choose.
right? You could just convert it to some other string first and throw that on there. Yeah. Jingle says user defined alias sounds good. We can nudge people to take some ownership.
Is it necessary to be fixed, or we can use a policy everyone can reuse and change his name?
Yeah, okay. Well, okay, that gets us into what's really interesting for me. And it says this in SIP 68. This reference token that has the datum attached to it can be referenced by more than one user token. And they don't even necessarily have to have the same policy ID. You can imagine creating new user tokens with a different policy ID, but that reference this one. So you have the benefit of viewing that reputation information while also creating a different policy ID that maybe grants access to some other tool. So the user's name actually could end up being dynamic, even if the reference token name stays constant. And keep in mind, whatever metadatum, inline datum, is living at that reference token, this can all be copied and reused and placed at another new reference token address when the time comes. So in that sense, Adrian, like you're saying, like these token names don't have to be the final constant. It's just that, and I guess we could burn them too, right? But there will always be a permanent record, even if we burn these, that token was on chain. So we're not tied down forever to a naming convention. That can be changed moving forward, but whatever we start with will create a permanent record of that thing having happened. Lucas says maybe throw gimbal in there. That's, yeah. So something like, because right, we're referencing PPBL, but not gimbal. So we could have like gimbal, PPBL, completion, alias, something like this. That feels a little long to me. Could do something like this. Of course, too. Let me drop some options also in Discord to give people a day. Yeah, we don't want to go past the max length. Let me drop some options in Discord and do a poll on that to follow up from this call.
I was thinking maybe more the GMBL instead of gimbal, so that we don't confuse it with tokens ever. And maybe if we prefix it, it would separate the letters, because if we put all the letters together, it's harder to read. So what I was suggesting was GMBL 100 PPBL.
Something along these lines, like that.
Yeah.
Starting with the number prefix just makes it easier to get the rest of the full name later. So if we put the 100 in between some other prefix, you know, then it's kind of a silly thing, but then making that unique string name becomes a tiny bit more of a headache when we start building tools for using these things.
It's up to you.
Let's throw some, I'll take this chat, I'll put some of those on Discord and ask for follow-up there. Acronyms, I know. We also, I mean, just for the record, we need eventually a name for Gimbal Project Treasury and Escrow. So if there's anybody who has a, who's got some ideas for naming something. Open for suggestions there. GPTE. All right. Well, so that's the state of where we're at, building the initial implementation here. Thank you for thinking through this today. I'm excited. I'm excited that we get to push something out there and see where it leads. What else is everybody thinking about? Any lack of clarity on any of these steps or anything you want to revisit?
I have a question regarding the reference token. So the reference token is only referenced here in this 1618 now. And this is only in this string here in the, yes. And the 1618, 80339, this is random.
Yeah, it is.
So isn't it necessary? So I'm beneath, I'm reading the SIP 68 here. And there is the retrieve metadata as third party, where the steps are construct reference NFT from user token. So the user token have you in this, we have in the 721. This is the user token here. Huh? And then we get the policy ID 100 test token. This is the user token. Huh? Look up reference NFT and find the output. It's locked in. So the reference NFT is the, oh yeah, it's the same with the 333 or 222, huh? Okay, so we don't, as a third party, we do not need to know what's inside these 1618 to find the reference token. That's my question.
Right, okay, yeah, I
Or
follow.
do we know the
that.
one, do we need to know
Right.
that there is another portion with 1618 where we have to get information outside of?
Right, right. So you'll have, we know they'll share, the token pair will share a policy ID. And under that policy ID, we'll know that there are these two token names. And each one has a different 3-digit prefix, but the rest of the string is the same. Is that sufficient to connect these tokens to each other? Or is there some advantage?
When you
here?
go to retrieve metadata as third party here, there is a little bit down, I think. Or
Okay.
yeah.
Third party, a third
Yeah.
party has this NFT with the 222 prefix they want to look up. The steps are construct the user token, right? So this string right here is going to be constructible given this information right here, as long as that third party is adhering to the standard where we just say, okay, well, if this number 222 is here, I want to replace it with 100 right here. Once I have this string, I can use any query mechanism I want to look that string up and find the UTXO where it's locked. From there, I get the inline datum at that UTXO, and that's what feeds me this data right here. So yeah, I think it's sufficient to
Okay.
not include it in the 721. but maybe just because this is what people are used to, maybe being able to see, oh, okay, and I know I deleted it a few minutes ago, but I think I could see a reason to put that back here, being that this just allows us to scaffold, right? Like people will have questions early on. Hey, wait, where is that reference token again? How do I find that? And maybe it will be worth it to include the reference token underneath this. We include that if we go back to including that, we still know that we want to create front-end tools that make this process feel seamless. But in the meantime, as people start to learn about this, we can still have that reference token represented in a way that people understand.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe it's easier to find the reference token then and to, I don't know.
I don't know either. You know what though? I'm just thinking about this more, that possible. I'm thinking about a near future where we get to go kind of share something different in a more public way. Talk about this on Twitter Spaces. And if we're able to drop people a link to a Pool PM page with that list of reference tokens and all their different names and aliases, I think that actually could be really nice to do. That's, people, there need to be bridges from what people understand right now to some of these new tools. Now I'm feeling like putting it back here. What do people think though? Anybody else? Any objections to including this as a bridge towards talking to people about this? Let's keep it for now. Keep it.
Yeah, I really don't know for what the 1618 string here is necessary exactly. So you have something for your own, but there's nothing that is secret in some way, or
Right.
I don't know.
This may be completely unnecessary down here. Absolutely. Right? This is just giving us some arbitrary string where we can have some separate data on the minting transaction for these tokens. But maybe it's silly to include this part. Why not just put it all in the 721 token? But we had some consensus earlier on this call that maybe it's worth having something of our own here, just to play with it, just to see what value it has for now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think it's difficult if it's not a standard or something. So if there was a string that means individual data or something.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Moving towards having a standardized key for this, right? Yeah, this represents some individual's data.
Yeah.
Nelson, what do you think?
Yeah, so like the problem is not with this stuff being there in the 721 part, right? Like we can have that too. Like we can
Yes.
still put that too, but still we want to say that we can make another standard for this kind of credentials token that doesn't have to be what's there out in the market, like 721 NFTs. We can still have another set of NFTs that are for credentials and this completion identity and stuff like that.
Yeah. I agree. And I think that's why I'm leaning towards leaving something here. Oh, and again, like if anybody has a strong feeling about what this key should be, it could be anything, right? Like we can place that there. But I think the benefit of keeping this is that when we start to roll out into the community with something that could become a standard, that's going to drive conversations, right? And emerging standards are something that people will talk about indefinitely, right? Let's go fire those people up. Let's say, well, here's a suggestion. And the moment you provide that suggestion, now people have something to argue with, push back against, right? And kind of further drive that development. Nelson.
Yeah, just another line I wanted to add was like, I don't know, this might be subjective, but like the 721 tokens out there are, for now, it's mostly for trading in the open market. It seems like I feel like that way, but defining this, we are sort of encouraging and saying that this is something very personal. This is something you earn, and I don't know, this might be a little subjective, but like we can push the thinking that this is something you earn, not something you buy or you get an airdrop of, and you should be accountable of the information in it, like, something like that.
Very good. I had the privilege of being introduced to some people at the summit who were really there, as self-described NFT degens, but they knew they were like, where's the next thing coming from? What else are people building? And getting to describe what we're doing to some folks like that and watch their faces as they were like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Like, yeah, show me, like, great. It's going to be really fun. I think NFTs have had a great life cycle so far, and it's clearly going to continue. But one of the benefits of NFTs is that they take people to a certain place where some of those people start asking the next questions. And I think there's a critical mass of people out there who are ready to see something, a little different. And I'm excited. I'm excited for what's going to happen when we put this in front of people. We're going to roll GPTE out on mainnet with these tokens, and Nelson and Sebastian Paban have put in their request for a token so far. And we're going to be able to go out there into the world and say, hey, this thing is live. You can start earning ADA and some gimbals by doing these things. Here's the on-ramp, and it's going to be fun to see what happens. Nelson.
Yeah, with the naming thing for the token that we just discussed now, like I kind of agree with what Jingle said. Like, I think ownership has a weight to what we're doing here. So like ownership that should be user defined, and I strongly agree that there should be a disclaimer with it. And for me, I think I even submitted with my real name, and I might be having some second thoughts on it. I don't know.
I'll double check with you. I'll double check. And in the follow-up to this, like I said, I'll add this recording and the repo link, but I'm going to write a call to action if anybody wants to just draft up what that disclaimer could be. I would love to have some help crafting that message. So I'll put that up. Very good. Thanks for the patient look at this. I appreciate having the chance to kind of talk it through and build my own understanding of it. And clearly there's going to be a module about this as we start getting it out into the world. I got to jump. I'm going to check in with the emerging Gimbal Labs Indonesia team. If you haven't heard about that, I'll be sure to share out what they're starting to think about. But here's a crew who is kind of taking matters into their own hands. A lot of you know Andreas already from PPBL. Thanks for this time, everybody. See you soon.